member in the School of Landscape Architecture and a curator of exhibitions at Boston Architectural College. The BAC is distinguished for its leadership in educating a diverse body of students through the design of landscape, architecture, interior spaces, sustainable environment, historic preservation, and spaces for human health. Supported by our exceptional practitioners and faculty, we lead the integration of practice-based learning with academic study. We're committed to transforming our design program to reach an even broader and more diverse student body, empowering them to realize their full potential without boundaries. Tonight, we're honored to welcome our guest speaker, Imen Ameur. This evening's event is the third in the spring 2025 Just Future lecture series, supported in part by Eastern Savings Bank. Imen Ameur is a global expert in technology governance, innovation, and policy with over 17 years of cross-sector experience. She's a professor of practice at Hult International Business School and has advised government, international organizations, and mission-driven institutions on AI policy, digital transformation, and ethical innovation. She also served as a senior executive fellow at the Digital Economist and vice president of innovation at Cluster Digital Africa, where she leads initiatives advancing inclusive development, institutional resilience, and responsible AI adoption. Please join me in extending a warm welcome to Imen Ameur. Thank you so much for having me. Okay, good evening. I'm gonna be using this other mic so I can also connect to the whole room. Just let's make sure this is working. Great. Let's make sure that also folks who are online can hear us clear and loud. So if you could have a thumbs up, virtual thumb on, or like you could also put in the chat where we want to make sure that everybody can hear us. Great. Seems to work. Technically, after we did the test, so you should also be able to see me online as well. I'll be moving. I like motion, as the title can tell, so I don't like to be static. Again, thank you very much, Yufan, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here at an iconic building, but also at a place where we see both creativity and future getting to the roots of the Boston like let's say arena. So it's real pleasure. I have heard a lot about the great work you're doing here. I was sharing earlier with the dean that I get to know like Yufan, who is leading the curriculum here and doing a lot of great work when it comes to lecture at MIT a few years ago. And I got really interested in the work that you are doing that she shared with me. And since then, we have been following each other on what we do. And we decided that it was time to share how technology gets and embraces, basically, the word of architecture. I'm pretty sure that all of us, to some extent, we are using technology today. Can we agree on that? Okay. So we'll talk about how that basically connects. We did have a call towards how AI is leading the new era for urbanism, but also for architectures and creative people all around. And what we try really to focus on is how that AI in a leading era is changing the creative design in a circular way, but also how in a world where we are so dependent on technology, I'll share a lot of anecdotes of how myself I'm addicted to that technology piece, right? How that can actually be connected to the critical thinking and creative parts so we keep our humanity and our competitive advantage like alive, and that will be the motion that I'm talking about, right? So please, this is not me just lecturing you. I know it's a lecture style, but at the same time, this is an opportunity for you to exchange and to ask questions. So feel free to get into the mic once I will see somebody there. I will give you the opportunity to speak. If you are online, well, probably the dean will help me with that to tell me if there is any questions, and I'll be more than happy to share those with you. Also, feel free then after to connect and ask questions and connect through your school as well, and I'll be more than happy. So back to the whole idea about this AI word and how artificial intelligence works. um, I need to understand a little bit where we are all together. So if we had to today explain what the word technology means to you, what is the first word that would come to your mind? Yeah, tool. Okay, I like that. Yeah, other words. There is no grade associated to this. So, pardon me. Accessibility. Okay. Yes, sir. Logic. Yes. Engineering. Yes. Computers. Innovative. Any other thoughts? Nobody talks about AI. I feel much better. I have been in a race talking just about AI, two words that comes to be the initials of my name. Right? It's the other way around, but I play a lot with it because it's IA and AI. In other languages, it's the same. So, yeah. So, glad that we're looking at this. And since you mentioned tool earlier, when I think about technology, I like to think back to the times where we started to write or to scribe what we think, how we feel, emotions, all over. So a couple days ago, there was a very big event happening in Egypt, right? They integrated the Grand Museum, and they shared 3,000 years of civilization. And one of the moments that I really liked in that inaugural moment was how they shared basically the descriptions on the walls back 3,000 years plus when the ancient people have communicated that way. And they use tools, and that is technology. Maybe that tool was very simple, but that is a way that people expressed how they felt, how they lived in a way with their own emotions and motion. And that was translated through technology. So by looking at that essence, we can tell that technology itself is not a contraindication to creativity. It's an extension to it. It's a way that helps us to promote and to basically share that feeling with others or share what we are thinking about. Think about the fact that we all have dreams and think about them in our brain, but then how could we share those? Some of us would speak, others would draw, others would write. And there are different other ways, and we don't do it in the same way. And those different visions are what would lead us basically to the momentum of sharing how a city should look like, or what is the need in terms of urbanism, or do we need actually more to understand the water flows, how things are, or do we actually need to understand if they need more routes? And understanding the need comes by the deep knowledge and communication with the people who live within. So that's basically how I built this lecture to you. And we'll just keep moving here to the next part if you want. You know, technology is never helpful. So sometimes it takes really a lot. So I'm gonna try this. No promises that it would work. If it doesn't, we tried it. We did try it very hard. Okay, it's not working. Yeah, it did somehow. Okay, great. So if we look back here into design at the turning point, right? I was sharing earlier how basically historically we started looking at the technology from the perspective of tool and how indeed like our critical thinking, logic, You mentioned engineering. Today we look at engineering as a discipline, but way back, engineering is also a way of thinking, a way of representing things, right? So that is very important too. And that basically led us to understand that there is a paradigm, basically, a paradigm between the hybrid cognition that that model will present to us, but also getting a sense of how that would be translated to humans and what that would mean to us, right? And if we look deeper, there is a big momentum that tell us that we are no longer talking about it is going to replace people, right? It's no longer just producing solely by them or by us. It's kind of a symbiotic connection between us, between the human and that extension that is the technology. And I like the word symbiotic because it shows that it's not the same, but we could kind of blend in without losing who we are, right? And then we need to understand that there are some critical elements that are related to culture that could present actually an issue related to risk of getting certain data omitted or abstracted. And that might interfere with the representation. But that was not an issue just in the era of artificial intelligence. I'm pretty sure when you think about creating your models, you're using computers today, right? Sometimes, all the time. No, I have a no computer. Who does not use a computer at all? Would you wish not to have a computer? Sometimes. Yeah. So the idea is between what we want to do and how we are doing it and the efficiency that it brought to us, that's basically for us like a must-have in design that we need to actually connect to. So what we gain with AI or artificial intelligence. But before we go to all this nice wording in here, let's ask ourselves, this fancy acronym, AI or artificial intelligence, what it is, what do we mean by it? And this, before I give you my own definition and how I look at it, and how interesting it is when you work on it for over 2 decades, and it has been there for more, and it only became interesting the past 5 years. That's a whole part. But back to you. So, what is AI to you? Any? When you hear that resonance of AI, anybody maybe think about Chat GPT? No? Does it give good recommendation as Yelp or not really? It helps? Okay, other thoughts? AI? Temporary intelligence? Yes, miss? Okay, misinformation, especially that we just went through the period of election and we reconfirmed our mayor here in Boston. So that went pretty okay. Other thoughts? So, what is this artificial intelligence? So basically, it has been there for over 50 years, right? The first time we have seen the wording as artificial intelligence was back in New Hampshire, and that was also in the Dartmouth University, Dartmouth School, basically, part of the whole university. But then the idea was they were trying not to say computing or saying words that were overused in other field of engineering or mathematics, and then they got to that wording of basically the word of like artificial intelligence. And this basically led us to the idea of can it be actually passing the famous Turing test, right? So that, oh, we are really way back. We're talking 50s here, right? So there is a very famous Turing test, and we very recently passed that test. I mean, when it was done in early 50s, it would not pass it actually. And the idea is, could actually a machine mimic a human in their way of behaving? There is a debate until today that it may or may not, but technically just the Turing test per se, we passed it. And the main dilemma back then was the capacity from a technical perspective. Do we have enough memory, right? Because computers did not look like my computer or your computer. They were like as big as this room, right? So if we look back, it was whether or not we had that capacity. But then the logical piece of it, which connects to one of the wording we have heard earlier about technology and AI, it was essentially getting to the sense where, okay, we have a process, we have an input that could come from a human or our reading or others, and then that we will have a process through which we have steps, and that constitute basically that algorithmic piece, and that algorithmic piece, all these fancy words are very simple by the end of the day. And then once we understand them, we could actually decide whether we want to use them or not and how we use them. So the algorithmic part, think about it as a set of instructions, right? Just like when we make cakes. I know it's almost dinner time, and I like dessert, my favorite thing in the dinner, right? So dessert or end goal, like say a project, think about it, you have steps to get to it. And those steps are the way the model will be executing itself. So you have the recipe, think about it as the data, okay? You like a chocolate cake, pumpkin cake, pumpkin tart. It's almost Thanksgiving, come on. Am I the only one eating dessert? No? Maybe. Okay, great. So getting back, if we think about the outcome as that pumpkin tart, right? Having a good pumpkin to start with, a good dough, having the spices that are needed, maybe some pecan if you're not nuts, have any allergy to nuts or others. All of these are your data today, okay? Now how you would be like cooking, the steps, how you would be mixing things. This is how the model would be working in terms of, okay, we want to have, like, let's say, half a pumpkin and a little bit of salt with a little bit of sugar. So this will become your data, and how you are mixing them are the instructions that the algorithm will be leveraging so they can execute it. So it's just set of like steps that they will go through, and there is kind of loops, etc. So this is, we're talking way back. This is like the algorithm way back, but it's still present today, but more, in a more sophisticated way. So we don't want like the tech people to be mad at us because I simplified so much. But by the end of the day, this is what it is. It's like you have data. This is your ingredients. You have set of rules, what to do, what not to do. You're gonna get an outcome. Now, let's suppose your pumpkin was the same pumpkin that you used for Halloween by the time we are in Thanksgiving, and that you left it outside. I have one of those too. It's kind of now greenish, kind of. So you don't want to make like your tart out of that. That is as simple as bad data, right? And we heard misinformation earlier, so that's another part that we need to take into account. So bad data would lead you to misinformation or disinformation. And even if you have the perfect recipe, even if you have the most sophisticated model, it will end up being not as good as you wanted it to be. So that is basically in a nutshell how the algorithm would work in regards of data. So why are we talking about this today in this specific lecture? It is the foundation. We're talking basically era of AI and how it will help us and why it's not at our disadvantage. But when we understand how it works, actually it makes a whole difference. And then those model evolved over the years, of course. We get more power, we got also more autonomy, we get also access to better like hardwares, and we're leveraging more data centers. There is a lot of like negativity to that as well when it comes to climate, but that's another discussion for another day. But we have better capacities. We leverage statistics. So all these models rely heavily on statistics and statistical model. And we learn to identify different objects. So we use different types of machine learning, some that is supervised, where we label what we know. Other are what we call unsupervised or self-learning, type of algorithms. They look at patterns. And patterns is very important, especially in the field that we are here gathered around, right? So understanding momentums, understanding patterns within a space, it's very important because this, we could consider the chair, right? Somehow we could use it as a seating chair, but this is also a chair. So if we were about to use an AI tool to detect with some computer vision whether it's a chair or not, and we trained exclusively on like this image, when we will share that specific one, it will not lead us to the right understanding of what it is. And I'm giving simple example, but we could have a different perspective, and we can look at it as we are reimagining a city, or how the city would look like, what are the different components. Imagine you are looking how you would be having a tour in the middle of a place with a lake and trees. What would work, what would not. But how could you leverage an AI tool if the understanding of a tree is not clarified? So you want to make sure that the understanding of your objects is clear. And this is where knowing which tool relies on what type of AI or of algorithm, to be very precise, would make a big difference, right? And they are, of course, even in the newer, what we call generative AI, so getting to that GPT and Claude and Sora, which Sora is very interesting. It gives you very realistic images. And that basically can tell you how sophisticated it could be. But if we do the wrong prompting, if we don't understand how things works, we won't get a beautiful image out of it. So all of this, it's us really looking at that artificial intelligence to understand how it works in a nutshell. Of course, they are more complicated model than machine learning, like deep learning and natural language processing, computer vision, and some of them are also associated with other technologies such as Internet of Things and others that will help us, especially when we think about space and space design. So if we think about it in that way, we can look at what we could gain about AI to be our like extension, right? So basically, it helps us with acceleration of ideation. Now, when we say acceleration here, we're not looking at, we are asking it what to do, but instead, it can give us other perspective. Because if we have lived exclusively in Boston, or have maybe visited some nearby cities or other locations, it doesn't give us the perspective of how overseas other cities have been built. And we could read books, that's for sure. We could look at movies and we could watch things, etc. But then the idea of leveraging AI in that sense is it will help us process more data sources to do so. A good tool for that is as simple as Notebook LM, which comes basically with Google, right? And even now, when you do a simple search on Google, you would have that. So it doesn't create new content. So it's not synthetic data, but it looks at what you have and it will get you whether or not that specific type of architecture or design have existed maybe 1,000 years ago, or is there some patterns? So this is why it's very important to know, are we looking for that image or are we looking at the component of it? So a circle, like a square, is it the cubic part that we are looking? So giving the different parts and then the functions, and that will give you a huge comparison. So it's kind of a library and it will help with that ideation. And then it will basically lead to optimization. So if you are in a project, thankfully now you're still at school, so you don't have to worry too much about that optimization besides for tuition, right? And for all the material. But if we get to a real project, and you probably do this already in your projects, you think about the cost, these machine learning tools and these LLMs could help us understand what we could reduce without compromising, because as an urbanist or architect, you have a liability and accountability. You're by then the signing person to it, right? So could be a good replacement without compromising quality, right? And so let's imagine that this same um, seat here would be paper-based. It could look like the same. Now, I don't know if I want to be personally trying it because I don't think it will hold me, right? So that could be in the parameters that I will have in the comparison tools, and then it would give me which material, maybe crock would work. What is the density of the crock that would help me do that? Because we could have a very thin layer of crock that would not tolerate like basically the weight, but other ones would do so. So that is basically for the like optimization piece. And then when we think about representation or bridging like that imaging imagination with the visibility, it kind of give us an like a ready mock that we could leverage to do trials and then take it to 3D printing, and that would be a great opportunity. And of course, accessibility. So getting access to libraries is very expensive. Traveling is even more. So sometimes as a first step, not an initial step, I do say first versus initial, I will explain that in few, it is great to help with the democratization. So basically this will help us with like strengthening the possibility and generating at scale. But the key part is like that designers, and I look at designers, I don't think just people who do painting or others, but designers as creative people, people who are urbanists, people who are in architecture, etc., must basically convert the possibility that would respond to creation. So that's kind of a nutshell where we have. Questions so far? Questions online? Not yet. Great. Okay, so what we risk? Big risk, right? A big part of my day to day is actually trying to set governance towards different types of technology. And the reason why is not because we are afraid of technology, but just like any tool, if it's not monitored the right way, it could become like dangerous. One of which is, do you cook at home? There are different types of stove. Like there is the induction system, you could have a gas system, some have flame, some don't, right? But in all cases, they all can burn. So if we don't have the idea that this could burn us, if we don't have that as part of the regulation, as part of the governance and rules, we won't know about it. So pretty similar if we don't understand what the AI could do, what are the bias associated with it, how it could bypass certain parts because of the way it was trained. And there are several famous cases where the AI actually, especially for computer vision, could be trained visually on recognizing some types of objects versus others it wouldn't recognize. It doesn't mean that like what we would call basically X has the same characteristics versus another place. A good example of that is what, let's say, a sofa would look like, or a fridge or others, right? But or if we are thinking of cars, right? The way we looked at cars in the 80s versus today is maybe not the same thing, right? And if we think about when we had the second industrial revolution, what the car looked like is still like not the car we have today. And if we look before that, before the first industrial revolution, we still called a car like basically like the image that we would have a Cinderella car with a carriage and horses with it. So, but it's still called car, right? So all of this is very important for us to keep in mind. And what I'm giving you all these examples, they seem very simple, but when it gets to governance, we need to understand what would work, what would not work. So governance in a nutshell is who does what, when, and where, and who is accountable. right? Who is accountable is a critical piece in the architectural word, because when time comes, and maybe it came for several of you, you have to sign off on XYZ project. And that is the piece that AI cannot be liable of. Today, AI is capable to produce a nice mock. It could even help with robotics, build it up, but they would not take the liability of it. It's the organizations or the people that would sign off on that. And we want it to be that way because at least we have the insurance. If we sit, we won't fall down, right? So we could have in parameters like, let's say this room will take a capacity of like 100, right? And maybe the real capacity is over 100. But that's what, by design, uh, being aware of the risk of incident, etc., and how fast we need to leave the building, we cannot have more than 100. It would definitely fit more than that. So it's just those elements that we could plan so the AI would represent them, but it cannot be accountable of. So that is one part. The other big thing when it comes to what we risk is the fact that we have a tendency to think AI would replace the designer and architecture. And I actually shared with Yufan before coming a very nice design by AI, and she's like, "This is like 100%." No, people. It's like 100%. Do you feel like threatened? It's like, not yet. I still do creativity. So I was like, great. So as far as output, the machine, and I call it machine, could generate that, but it would not like connect to the context. So that part is still not there. So that replacement is not 100%. And then who would lead over the other? So is it like we are leading the technology, or is the technology leading us? And then we have basically the historical part, which will encode the historical bias into future forms. If you watch a couple years ago, maybe more than a couple, iRobots, Will Smith, now they have those robots for sale, for real. It's version 1. I don't recommend anybody to get them yet. I'm going to get one maybe when it gets to V2. But not yet now. I just feel like it's too cool. But would we sleep and have that whatever thing move around? That's a little borderline, I would say. So since we don't know yet that part, there's a lot of bias that come with it, right? And depending how it was programmed, what is considered a risk. Let's say risk of floating. We're in Boston. This area could float anytime, specifically this location, right? You know that we are on the top of water here, right? You would tell me more of this. You're the expert. I'm just the technology person, so we don't need to run, right? Not yet. So if our understanding in terms of sensitivity analysis of what or by when this whole thing could get back to water, and our understanding of risk is not the same as the machine, that is another risk that we could be at. So that's what the futuristic part is. So basically, design power would or must remain aligned with people and place, not platforms. And this is like the key part we're trying to advocate for when it comes to the governance piece. Questions so far? Not yet. Good. Okay, maybe it would work. Let's see. Try it one more time. Great. This is done by AI. This is real. So this is a project by Iconic. And what they are doing is they are actually making real houses. And this is the 3D model. Basically, what they try to do is like to have this material and efficiency to have like better speed. And the risk, there is this associated problem that is with cultural element and how it is generic, it's becoming more generic. So all the houses would look the same. It will not be a home, it will be just another building. But from a governance perspective, which this specific picture kind of takes, you see these, and now more and more you will see those. This is to say that it has been generated by AI. So you would have that reassurance that this is beautiful, but let me double check how it is. And from a governance perspective, what we have been working on is essentially to get the tech people to mention that. So people don't just go and do so. But then if it's for mock part, or if it's just for like a 3D model, so you could be showing it more, etc., then it would make sense. So that is basically happening. Now the good news, because it's not only bad, the good news related to this is the fact that we could basically do a lot of testing when it comes to sustainability at a smaller scale. So we go back to what we discussed earlier, which is the optimization of cost. So instead of reinventing the whole wheel and having a whole city, we will just do this and test and see at scale how it would look like. How comfortable would you be to have these models? Does it look great or not? Yes, no, somehow, no. Anybody feel he gonna be replaced or she gonna be replaced? They will be replaced? No. No, right? We have creativity. They don't have that. The tools, they don't, right? Great. But this is a very successful company, by the way. They are making millions of dollars, and this is what they actually accomplished with it. This is the real house. They built it through like that model. So that was the mock, which were these pieces, and this is the real one. Does it look nice? Good enough. But then the issue is we would have more generic things in there. The other problem is just like the tart, right? We said we have bad ingredients, then we don't get the great outcome. Similarly here, if we don't know the materials, we're not basically setting the high standards for the machine, we can't. And the only way for us to know that is really to get a sense of touching the material, getting connected to it, having the feeling, because we could read all of these in books, etc., but there is a different momentum when we have that feeling of the core material in our hands, and we're like modeling things, right? So it gives us a different sensation. And that part is not yet there. And if we think about the power of just having some clay, I'm a big clay person. I like to make clay and Play-Doh and stuff like that, right? And not just for the kids, just for me, right? So that gives us a different perspective. Great. Do you have lovers of fashion? Great, I can tell, right? Thank you. You're like great taste today. Fashion. So all of these are AI designed models, right? They look cool. They respond to what's going on. But then one of the great parts to it is it did like show what we could leverage the material for. It created a new way of it. But then at the same time, the biggest risk we're finding is the labor issue, right? We don't know what is our role, how things would be for the people. So the key here is not to just say we don't use it anymore, because even if every single person in this room and the people who are online would decide not to use it, somebody will. And I guess the key is to be aware of that. And once we are aware that it could be in the market, we could differentiate how it works. So since we have an expert in fashion, we call you the expert in fashion today. Is that okay? Okay, great. So great. How does it sound for you in terms of using the material? So just so you know, the prompts that were for these, we're giving them like the nature of like the material, like whether it's silk or others, and what are the movements that they could do with it that would flow. Would you say this is acceptable? from a fashion perspective? If you had to run a show, fashion show. Who would think it's amazing? There is no grade associated to this. And the dean and professor, please don't look. Yes? The practicality is an issue, yeah? Yeah, that's true. Any other elements? The ethical piece, right? Also, like it's somebody else, because all of these, they get inspiration by data that have been trained on other people work. If we go to a real fashion show, we might end up seeing something very similar. So that gave us to what is actually the truth. It's somehow philosophical. Yes, go ahead. Mhm. Yeah, definitely. And that is a very relevant point as well. So we're moving to an example here that was in MIT, and it's also at the Media Lab. So there are a lot of projects. They are actually uh, connecting basically technology with urbanism, etc., to enhance it. And it would say, so basically how AI helped, it basically helped to explore that complex scenario and what could happen. Think about, if we think about urbanism, there is a lot of if-else situations, and the time it would consume for us to think about all of them and put them into practice is very long. So this kind of optimized the time and help us, and that's what it did. And then it also helped with modeling climate and access in terms of equity. And a good example for that is actually, do you use the weather forecast on a daily basis to see what to dress up with? So that's also relying, by the way, on AI. Not the ChatGPT AI, but also on like models or modeling, right, that relies on training several data over the years to have a better prediction. So in that sense, it could be our ally, right? But we need to understand the how and the what of it. And then they basically also like leverage it to understand the risk analysis for it and like the vulnerability. You know, when you do a test for resistance for a building or other parts, so it could also do these type of simulations and help with it. Great. Okay. Questions so far? Online, in person, comments? I did like this part by the AI, but the other part is like this whole design was for a robot if they needed to be in the show. And that basically get us to the model I want to share with you, the circular model, which is how could we have all of this without losing who we are, right? So if we have AI and we have innovation and critical thinking, creativity, how could we remain relevant to ourselves, right? So the idea is not to choose one or the other, but rather to have them connected. Did you ever play this game? You know, it's with a paper, right? It was one of my favorite when I was a kid. So that's the whole idea. Like, you never know which one you would get, but you need all of them to get into the game. So that's how it is circular, but at the same time, you need the connections between them. Great. So this is like our main model that I wanted to share with you. But how we get to it, right? So new role for creative designer, and we have about like 3 minutes technically. If we don't want to do 45 minutes, but if you want to stay longer, we could do that too. But we have about two more slides that I want to share with you. So the designer piece, like here, or the role of designer would shift. And that shift is kind of an ethical gatekeeper as well, but also the creative person. When we say gatekeeper, sometimes it's kind of reducing the role, but also it gives us so much power. Because if we think about the importance of a human in architectural vision, and pretty much we look back, and I really like you to transpose this whole scenery into the magical buildings that have been done over the years. And I started the discussion about Egypt, but if we think about Babylon, if we think about different cities around the globe, some that now are under oceans, etc., they probably use different other types of tools that may have disappeared over the years when we are just getting back to them. So all of that gets to that power that humans would have to get sense of like that ethical component to it. So there is a process for that, and I call them like a 10-stage human to AI to be a co-designer in the process. So the first part is the intent and the problem framing, right? And we start basically with just crafting this into a piece of paper or others, and we say, okay, so what could we do? And the second piece is leveraging the tool, right? The AI exploration, where we can do any of the present tools, whether it's a sophisticated one using LLMs and like robotics, or it's a one that just relies on statistics. Then we have the element of curation of the meaning. So it's kind of a double check to what that AI said to us. And then we go to the critical evaluation and bias assumption, because there is also a lot of issue related to ethical consideration when it comes to whether or not we recognize people and shape. Actually, AI is a lot biased when it comes to women. It's so unfortunate. Most of the data was exclusively trained on more white people than like everybody else around the globe. And it was not done on purpose. That's the issue. It was just done because they had access to the technology, they trained it. And we see it a lot with computer vision, actually. And this is why when people try to use the technology, it would give not necessarily what the outcome we are thinking about. And then we'll go to basically that from critical evaluation to the rapid prototyping. A good example for the rapid prototyping was that example that they used, whether at MIT or the Icon example. So they would have all the fashion show, right? And then once we have that, we kind of address the ethical and IP check. Now they started doing this. Most of the LLMs, they would attribute whether it's your work or not, and to verify. One great work that is happening in countries overseas more than here is to ask for more verifications. We have some laws that protect us, but we're not yet at 100%, so we feel a lot of misinformation. No. And then the part is to check whether the equity and accessibility. And when accessibility here, we mean whether the system that we're using took into account, if we're thinking of a building, etc., is it accessible? And then let's take the example of curb roads, where when the curb on the sidewalks, it was done for a purely accessible reason, but we all use it to get our luggages and a lot of things. So it was designed for something, but the reality could be used for other parts. So sometimes accessibility could also have design reasons behind it. And that's a very good example. And then the stakeholders testing. This is fundamental when we think about technology, to have it validated by the people, and the people who are in the work group, but also like the holistic part. And then the relative iteration. So reflective iteration is after you have a model that you proposed and you got iteration with AI, you get that step back, take a step back and look at it from an iterative perspective. What would you do, how you would do it? And then the final part, this is where you get that sign off. And they don't do it just because they like us. This is just in case something goes wrong, basically. And this is why Just so you know, all the tools that we use, they go back to anything that happens. One, it's not IP related to us. So anything that is on all the LLMs is not IP to us unless we can prove it. So if you have any product, please go check with the IP team before you use it all in there. Don't use anything unless you are sure you're comfortable talking about it at the open cafe. So if it's your basically thesis project, don't run it on AI unless you already have published it somewhere. If you have it in a journal, that's good enough. You could fight it back. So, and this is where you become accountable. Okay, any questions? Questions, no questions? So I will end up basically here because I know I told you I'll do only 45 minutes, right? But I did prepare a lot of other good links for you, a lot of cases that I'm happy to share with Yufan and the team, and she could share it with you so you could leverage this. And if you have questions, so this is by the end of the day, my message to you is there is a lot to say about AI and technology and how they could be an extension to what we do so it could help us enjoy better the life around us. But it's fundamentally important, no matter how we think that technology is not important to our work, to know that it exists. Because by knowing that it exists, by understanding how it functions, we could have a better outcome from our own work. And if you forget everything after today, remember the easiest way is to remember that the cake and the ingredients and how the process work, and you would have a great understanding. So human centricity at the heart and center, and it's not one or the other. Think about it as that game. Okay, great. Thank you very much. Any questions? Questions? Thank you. Questions? In the chat. Yeah, you can block them.
So AI, Patrick Kutowski says AI is generally very resource intensive. Considering how much drinking water is used, how can we as architects validate such a resource intensive process on top of an already expensive design service?
Well, that is a very valid question. Earlier, I did mention that as we were thinking of how AI evolved over the years, one of the key elements was whether or not that would come at a cost to the environment. So the simple answer is yes, it comes at a very high cost, but that very high cost, despite the amount of liters of water that like a simple iteration on an LLM would have, it's still less than the emission of cars that we have around us or of other industries that we have. So this is one thing, not to say that we should do it, but this is how, by the way, most of these tech firms keep like going and they get the credits. The other part is there are different programs nowadays, especially for because one key part is the data and where to store the data, because each iteration we do, those iterations basically is new data that is there, and it's more data centers that are needed. So in our country here, most of the data centers are in Virginia, state of Virginia, right? And even we are trying to build more of those because the ones that would own the data are the most powerful nowadays. So there are alternative energies. So if we think about that would help reducing that part. So we have offshore wind, using nuclear for that. So all of these are current alternatives. Now, to get the policy to approve them, it takes forever. Unfortunately, the technology is much faster, but all of these are in progress. As a matter of fact, there was one of the Mass Challenge winner proposed to Google how to have a sustainable LLM, and it's now in practice. I will also share that example with you, Fan, so you could look at it. And it's very interesting. They also won the AI for Good at Geneva last spring. I was the advisor of this company, so I know how they have been working. And those are very small projects that are going on, and it's not very lucrative, basically. So, to the point of Patrick, was it Patrick that asked this question? Yeah. Like, it is expensive in one sense, but the idea is not to use it all the way. So if you recall the 10 steps, the technology is there only in three. So most of it is you, and you're just having that few iteration. The issue is if you rely on it for the whole process, then it will become expensive. So it's like more as an extension. And I know this might not be ideal answer, but unfortunately, this is where we are today. I hope that helped.
So we have another question online, but if anybody in the room wants to ask a question, if you would stand at the mic, then everybody can hear you and it will be recorded. In the meantime, Anthony Lowe would like to know, do you think AI will take over the marketplace apart from the approval of architects? And then how do you think it will evolve in the need for architects in a design sense? Would there be more of an evolution for architects to be involved in the knowledge of tech?
Okay. So the simple question, the answer is no in this specific case. So would it take it systematically? No. First, the globe is so large. And let me tell you, I do travel a lot in different countries and continents. And despite the fact that everybody is saying AI all the time in most of the rooms that are entered, actually, this is the only room the first word was not AI. So I'm very happy. And I'm glad I actually changed the title. But then to simplify, would it take the job of a designer, architecture, or a urban person? The direct effect is no, but it's gonna change the way the job look like. So the characteristics of the job would be different. So if we think about architecture as a field, it's a no. If you want to be just designing with a pen and pencil, sitting on your desk all day long, it would not be optimal for you to do so. However, if you think about it as an extended tool, then it won't. If we were look at the World Economic Forum report about jobs of the future, most of the jobs of the future rely on data. And we have seen many jobs that we are having today with their current titles shift. So the core to it is to really see how to enhance the human centricity and creativity within the jobs that even today the machines cannot 100% reach it. Even if we will go to AGI, which we're a kind of a borderline with it, it won't. So it won't replace, it would shift, it will hopefully augment, but it could be at a high risk of changing how things are. Hence, we need to have new skills. This is why it's critical to know that it exists. It's critical to know how it functions and to take advantage of it so it doesn't take over. I hope that helped.
And thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else have a question in the room?
Yeah.
Brett?
Question is. That's right. Okay, great.
Uh, who exactly is sorting through all the acceleration of uh, of imagination out there, and who is creating the um, uh, who
So is it more about who is behind all the AI and technology, or who has the power today?
like you have ideation,
Yeah,
you have imagination, and
yeah.
you can sit there at night imagining any number of wonderful things and any number of unproductive things, and so you get acceleration in all directions. And say maybe half of thought, everything below the horizon, is completely irrelevant. Um, so
Who
you
is
have to
doing that?
you have to know that everything below the horizon is irrelevant, and you're accelerating in every direction and returning results from every direction. So, um, and also there is weather in the way of acceleration. There is wind, and all sorts of things corrupting the acceleration process. Um, yeah, who exactly has access to one's accelerated thought, and who exactly is who exactly?
So I wish I would have the answer for that because there is not one person. What I could tell you in that regards is, let's say if we look at the role that the people who hold art and imagination and creativity and has architect and urbanist, etc., had over the years, um, we get a sense of what we know is the limitation or what is behind the horizon or below a certain level, etc. So that gives us a sense of where things that we have learned over the years, civilizations, etc., from readings, from contexts, from lectures, etc. So we kind of build that knowledge. Now, when we stop imagination, um, when there is a piece of art, I like painting personally, and what I might think is a finished product might be an unfinished for another person. So there is no limits, at least to me, of when imagination stops, because you could take a Michelangelo and look at the work that he has done, and then you say, I can imagine this going further, and it's Michelangelo, right? So that might be considered an insult from another person, but from my imagination, maybe I can look at that art and start thinking, what if it had colors? What if it was covered? What if, right? All that what if is my own imagination. Just like when you walk into a museum and you have different perspective, we could look at the same thing, but it's not the same thing. So we are the ones that say, this is what I would consider good enough for today or for that momentum. Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. So we're not yet into the machine. So the first part was to answer directly the question of when to stop. To me, as human, we decide when. So these systems, the way they were built, is reflecting the design and the understanding of the people who built that. In other words, if the pre-program in the recipe was said that after X number you would have that, that is what the end would be, or what an apple should look like, or others, then they would have it at that time. So that gets back to how the system was designed. Now, the third component to your question is, so who has that power? As of today, is the tech giant who have that power of stopping when and what. And this is why we try through governance models to push to human-centered design thinking, where we would have a person in the loop.